Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am ecstatic about our guest today. Her research has illuminated the vital connection between diet, energy, physical, and cognitive function. She did her postdoctorate fellowship at Harvard Medical School and was an adjunct professor in Ottawa University before joining Oxford University in 1991. She is the founder and director of T-deltaS, whose mission is to enhance human performance, cognitive function, and general health. Please welcome Kieran Clarke. Welcome, Kieran.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's wonderful having you on the show. For those of you listening, this has been a long time that I've been chasing Professor Clarke to come on the show, and we finally got her today. And so we're going to unpack some human performance tips and tricks. But before we jump into that, I'd love to know, Professor Clarke, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Well, it never occurred to me until I was about 55 that I would ever be running a company, that I would ever start a company, let alone run a company, and I would still be running it 20 years later. I mean, that's endurance.
Yes, absolutely. So let's, a lot of our audience members are entrepreneurs, business owners, and then on the other side, or in combination, are athletes as well. So since you led off with the company side, talk to us about some of the surprises of starting a business sort of unexpectedly.
Well, I don't know about surprises, but when you're a scientist, so I mean, I've been a scientist virtually all my life. You don't think of commercial things at all, and if you do think of it, you think, well, being a business person is really easy. I mean, it's the same as going out and selling lemonade at the front, out the front when you're a kid, and so you think that that's what business is. It's not true. I mean, you're thrown in the deep end when you're at Oxford, and they say, "All right, we've set you up with a company. Now go and do it." And you think, "But what do I do next? What do I do to do this?" And you have no idea, absolutely no idea. And so you're forever asking for advice and asking what the next thing is to do, and it's really difficult, really difficult.
Certainly,
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit more about that journey. We you're researching and teaching at Oxford, developing science and these products. Did that product then turn into the business, or was there a business that they said, Professor Clarke, we want you to come start running this commercially? Like what was the chicken and what was the egg?
Well, certainly they wouldn't have done the chicken. I mean, they would never have would never have asked me to run a company unless I had actually come, sort of, well, my group and other people had been working in this ketone field forever, sort of looking at energy metabolism and looking at how ketones worked in the body. So nothing, I mean, we never thought of commercial at all because we were working with ketones that we bought from a chemical company. We were working with the salts. And so, but we knew about ketones. And then in 2003, DARPA put out a call for somebody to invent a really efficient food for their soldiers in a battlefield. And we went along and talked to Dr. Belitsky and at DARPA and said, well, we think we can do something and it'll be based on ketones. And so they gave us $10 million to invent our ketone food. And so we spent a couple of years doing that, trying to work out how to give ketones. And then IP came from it because it was absolutely novel. And sort of we worked with chemists all around the world and, trying to work out what to do. And then the IP started coming from it. And so the university said, well, we're not going to pay for the IP. You have to start a company to raise the money to pay for your own IP. And so that's what we did.
That's awesome. What a great story. I've done a little bit of work for a company, a drone business that was a university discovery that was commercialized. And it's amazing that how those ideas kind of come out from science and then out of a lab, and then you get thrown into the deep end, as you said, as a business owner. Um, Professor Clarke, you mentioned going to people for advice. Any um, resources that you've been relying on sort of as you're learning how to build and grow this business?
Well, I really rely on the patent lawyers. I mean, there's no way that you could do the patents by yourself, or the trademarks. You just don't know enough, and it's hard to know what's important and what's not important, and what you should put in an application, what you should leave out, and where it will go, and what divisionals are, and all that. You just couldn't do it, just as a scientist. And also you couldn't afford it as an individual. I mean, they're really expensive. Um, but also, I mean, I had no sort of also when you're scaling up, that's a different thing again. So so if you're making it in the lab, I mean, not that I've made it in the lab, so you depend on chemists to make it in the lab. You depend on chemists to invent the molecule that you're going to use. You can test it. I mean, that's what we did. We could test it and see if it worked, or test a whole lot of them actually, of molecules that they made. And then when you settle on one, and the one we settled for was just the one that tastes best. I mean, but it tastes terrible anyway. I mean, but it was the best tasting of terrible tasting compounds that chemists made, and the chemists refused to try them until after they said they'd never eaten anything they'd made themselves before in a lab. And we said, well, we have to, because otherwise we don't know which one to go with. And so we went with one that we thought tasted the best of the lot. Really tastes terrible. And so we went with that one, and that was our deltaG. But then we didn't know how to make it, and then we didn't know the best way to make it. So you can make it all different ways. So we didn't know how to make it, and so we relied on chemists for that. And then we didn't know how to scale up, and we relied on chemists for that, and chemical companies. So all the way through, you're relying on people. And now I really rely on people who know how to do e-commerce. I mean, for me, I don't even do social media, let alone e-commerce, so it's way beyond me.
That's that's a great story. You know, I was just thinking as you're explaining that, my question for you is around managing and working with teams. And I wondered, is it different working with a team of chemists who are working in a lab versus a team in your business? So, your HR person and your operations person and your social media person, your e-commerce. Do you find that working with those two different types of teams are different?
No,
No.
no, I don't find it different at all. I mean, they're all really dedicated to what they're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. And so you just have to, I think probably the way I manage people is different, in that I'm sort of more like their mother than anything else. I mean, I never tell anybody what to do. I just assume that they know what to do and they're good at it. And so, we just have a discussion, and they go off and do things and do them really well.
That's fantastic. I'm gonna shift gears on you slightly, and well, let's not go there yet. Can you talk about the science behind deltaG? And I'm new to it. You were introduced to me a few months back. I now use it for my coffee and get my day sort of fired up with the Gold brand. But I don't understand what it does, but I know it works. It's been working for me, and so it'd be great if you could sort of educate me and the audience of sort of like what's happening when I put that teaspoon of Gold into my coffee, and I just sort of get more alive as the day goes on. Sort of what's the real science that's going behind the scenes?
Um, should we step back a bit and say what ketones are
Yeah, that'd be even better. Perfect.
to start there, and then we can talk about exogenous ketones after that. So ketones are formed naturally in the body. They're made from fat, and and they're made from fat in the liver. So so all your fat stores are really stores of ketones waiting for you to stop eating. So you've always got a form of ketones, only it's fat, and fat is a form of energy for most of your body, e- except for the brain, and then so your brain runs on glucose, and glucose comes from your diet and and breakdown of skeletal muscle if you're not eating. So, but but carbohydrate turns to fat, which is really sad, but it does. And then when you haven't eaten, you turn that fat into ketones, and so your ketone levels go up, and they can vary from almost 0 to 11 millimolar really easily. And it just depends on how much you need in your body for whatever reason. So if you haven't eaten for 3 days, your ketone levels will be really quite high, and that will come from fat. Okay, and they're sort of like instant energy. They're really small molecules, so they're very quick to transport across membranes. So you make them in the liver, and then they zoom in to all your cells, and they go straight into the mitochondria as instant energy. So that's why it's so quick. It doesn't have to go through glycolysis all the way, for breaking down glucose or the ways to break down fat. It's just straight in and instant energy. So they're perfectly natural, and um, uh, they're also racemic, which is why what we've made as a food, as an exogenous ketone, is so expensive because it's got it's the R form of the molecule. And so anyway, so we knew this. We knew from experiments that ketones provide instant energy, and they provide energy for the heart, and they can replace glucose as well. And even better is when you use glucose and ketones together. So it's just fantastic. So when you have exogenous ketones, it's like you don't have to break down the fat. You can just raise your ketone levels, and the whole body can use them, and it does. So that's why you feel as though you're more alert. It's because you've got ketones. Your brain is using ketones and glucose, and the same with the rest of your body. So when you feel really tired, your muscles can use ketones, and the ketones help preserve glycogen when you're exercising. So they're not just instant energy; they also have signaling properties, and that's because all the substrates in our body, glucose, fat, whatever, they all control their own metabolism, and so it's all this feedback and interrelationships between, more or less our food groups and other foods. So it's very interesting.
That's really helpful. Which led me into my next question. When did so you were developing this through DARPA for our soldiers. Um, when did you discover or realize that this is a human performance enhancement, which then led to Ironman athletes and Tour de France athletes and all these really high performing athletes sort of now using the products. Can you tell us a little bit about that story of like, when did the light bulb go on and say, hey, these high performance athletes could really improve their training and their recovery by using these products?
Oh, well, it was a slow process. But the whole aim of the DARPA funding was to find something to help performance and cognitive function. So, so what was happening was that the soldiers were sort of going out into battlefield, and they'd take a ton of equipment with them and throw away their MREs. So they'd think, oh well, I'm not going to get hungry. I'll just take more ammunition, as it were. And then they'd be out there for several days, and they'd run out of food, and then they would stop functioning properly. They couldn't think properly. They were just starving, and so the army or DARPA wanted to do something about this, and which is why they put out the call, and we said we could do the food. So it was really, the food was invented for performance and cognitive function. And so that's why. And then slowly, I mean, this was we weren't sure what this would do. I mean, it was all the way through. I thought, we're going to fail. This is just not going to work. We don't know what levels to get. We don't know whether it will, kill people. So we had to go through all these safety things, and first into human and all that sort of stuff, and go to the FDA. The FDA knows us very well, because we just had to we did everything by the board. You had yes, we went to the FDA many times. They told us what to do, what tests we had to do, all of the animal testing as well as into humans, and it took years. So we had the molecule in, let's say, 2005. We knew what the molecule was going to be, and yet so we started talking to the FDA then, and we first got our letter of no objection to give it to the military in 2009, but we had to do the testing first. So all the way through, we've had to, had to test it, and then we've been learning all the way through. So we didn't know whether you could just have one drink a day, or 3 drinks or 4 drinks a day. We didn't know what the pharmacokinetics were. We didn't know anything. So
Wow.
all the way through, we have been working on this and trying to work out, what it does, when it's best to take it, what are the interactions with glucose and, and fat, and, it's just been a learning experience all the way through.
Yeah, as is life, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that makes me curious. So I do long distance triathlon. I'm a back of the pack finisher. I do finish, but I usually got the glow sticks on. So I'm not the Tim O'Donnells who are like breaking world records and the rest of it. How does an athlete like me benefit from using your product? Like, what's the right prescription? Clearly, it's not an everyday sort of enhancement for me. Maybe it should be, but like, what would your recommendation be for sort of a standard athlete who's looking to improve him or her performance? What would be a good prescription of your product for somebody like me?
Well, for a start, it depends how much money you've got. So, so sadly, it's really expensive, and so I think that really it's limited by how much people can afford. So, and why they're actually taking it. So, for example, elite athletes such as Tour de France teams, sort of they have a little bit in the morning, sort of with coffee, and then they'll have it during, when they're out riding, with a glucose drink as well. But really, it's the end of the race when they're losing cognitive function that they really need the deltaG, so that, the last hour or, sort of when they're feeling really exhausted and when they have the pile-ups. That's when somebody makes a mistake and all the rest go down. And it's just sort of, they're exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And then they have it for recovery because it does help with muscle fatigue. And it also helps with muscle pain and cramps. Yeah. And then they have it for sleep. So, and personally, I drink it for sleep. So it's just wonderful for sleep.
So are you adding that to your tea, like before bedtime tea, or?
No. I don't have any caffeine after about 9:00 in the morning.
Mm.
So I have, a couple of mugs of tea in the morning to get going. And then I have no caffeine at all. And then I drink 20 mils of the pure stuff just before bed. So before I just go up to bed. And you're asleep within a couple of minutes. You just put your head down and you think, am I gonna wake up stiff? You know, and then you set yourself up and off you go. And then you just say, right, go to sleep. And you're just asleep.
It sounds magical.
But it's not like a sleeping tablet where you wake up groggy. You don't wake up groggy at all. So
Mm.
and it helps with the T waves, slows down the T waves, which normally slow anyway, but it just helps slow them down.
And have you seen, speaking of sleep, right? Because that's such a big part of recovery. And we've got all these wearables now, right? Your Oura Ring and your Garmin watch, and you wake up every morning and you got a sleep score. Do you see improvements in sleep scores?
I don't believe in those things. I think they're rubbish.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Let's unpack that. Tell me why.
Because you end up worrying about sleep all the time. And so you just, "Oh, I didn't sleep properly," or, "I turned over 3 times," or something. And you think, "Who cares?" As long as you're waking up refreshed, don't worry about it. Don't It's not worth worrying as long as you've got good sleep habits. I mean, you can't expect these things to be wonderful and help you if you don't have good sleep habits anyway.
Sure.
So if you're drinking a cup of coffee before sleep and then suddenly you can't go to sleep and your Garmin's telling you're that you haven't slept, well, you haven't slept and you know why.
Yeah, 100%. So just going back to the athlete, you know, those of us that are in this sort of the Ironman distance triathlon, there's a lot of investments we make in our bikes and our gear and things that kind of gets us to the starting line. So it's not too far out of reach to invest in a supplement that you've produced. Clearly not to the level that the Tour de France teams are using it. But so going back to that question, like what would be a good, assuming money wasn't an object of obstruction, well, maybe that's too big of a leap, but what would be a good prescription again for somebody like me to utilize the product from time to time?
Well, I would just keep it for when you're actually competing, and maybe use it for sleep or recovery. But sort of if you're training and you're not doing something that's too exhausting, I wouldn't bother. You're not going to notice any difference really. And you've got plenty of glucose there. So, it's when you're starting to break down muscle to make glucose that you really need the ketone.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that that's what's happening at the end of a Tour de France.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So thinking about a race, it almost feels like somewhere, if it's a triathlon, right? Somewhere on the run where I just know I'm gonna, like, just from experience, I know when the wall's coming, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a mile marker that my run walk strategy turns into a walk run strategy. And it's probably around that time that this supplement could sort of like just give me that little extra boost, clear up the brain, Am I diagnosing that right?
So I would say probably a half an hour before that time, then you have a glucose drink and a ketone drink.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. So I am gonna change topics. I'd love to know a little bit more about you. Like, how did you discover science? Tell us about your childhood. Give us a little bit more of your background.
Right. Oh, well, I was always, pretty good at maths and, chemistry and physics and all that. Um, and I wasn't any good at artistic things. I'm just terrible. I can't I can't paint. My mother was a painter and I can't paint. My father was a singer. I can't sing. I mean, it's just terrible. So I ended up thinking, well, I might as well do something I enjoy. I enjoy doing maths and I love figures, and working with numbers and stuff like that. It's just great. So I thought, well, I'd do that. I didn't want to be a clinician, a doctor, because you're just dealing with sick people all the time, and I just
Mm,
didn't want to deal with sick people, especially not as a GP. I just thought, oh, that'd be terrible. And so I ended up doing biochemistry, um, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. Loved actually all of biological sciences, really, and really love physiology. So, m- what I do is a combination of biochemistry and physiology, and I just love it. And also, from a very young age, I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to live around the world. I always wanted to live in New York. And I never got to. But anyway, but I just wanted to, I did live in Boston and that was really nice. But so I wanted to live all around the world and travel, and that's what I've done.
mm, that's brilliant. Did you live in Boston for school for Harvard and then moved
Yes,
back?
when I was in, yeah.
Yeah,
So I was there from between. I went there in first in 1985, and then and worked there until the end of 1989, and then I went to Ottawa. Mm.
wonderful.
I
Um,
loved it. I loved
I'm doing a race in August in Ottawa, and it'll be the first time that we've taken the kids to Canada. We've been UK, Germany, Switzerland, all over the US for races, but now we're finally going north and can't wait. It looked like a beautiful city.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, but if you go over the river to the Gatineau Park, you'll get eaten by midges.
Really.
Yeah. Oh, no, black flies. They're called black flies. They just eat you.
Ooh, I have to
Yeah,
research that.
yeah, yeah.
So, Professor Clarke, tell the audience where they can find more information about your products.
Well, on the website, on the deltaG Ketones website, um, basically, is the place to go. Or just do a Google search. There are lots of um, papers where scientists have done research using the ketones. So the ketones are not just for sports people, of course.
Mm,
Um, they're for other things as well. So various sort of people are using them for migraines. They're using them for, well, sleep, as I said. They're using them for tremor. Sort of people with Parkinson's are using it to stop the tremor. So they're using it. There's a group in Germany, a clinical group, and a children's hospital who are keeping children alive using the ketones.
wow,
So they've got metabolic diseases, and they would die without it.
that's incredible. My last question for you, is there one particular pro athlete that has been your favorite to work with?
Well, T.O., of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
it's amazing.
everybody loves him.
Right, that's right. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Professor Clarke, for your time today. Oh, guess what? I one more question. I'm assuming you're also working on developing ways to lower the cost of the product.
Oh, yes, that's my main aim at the moment. So we just have to get that cost down.
Well,
Yeah.
please keep
I mean,
working at that for
yeah,
the
a
rest of us.
long way down.
Every little bit helps for sure.
Yes, we want it so that everybody in the whole world can just walk into the supermarket and buy it,
That'd be brilliant.
you
That would be
know,
brilliant.
and everybody in the world should be drinking. I mean, instead of spending money on Ozempic, they should be spending money on deltaG.
Mm, well
Mm,
said.
yeah.
Well, again, Professor Clarke, thank you for your time today. Audience members, if you like the show, please subscribe. Please research and learn more about ketones. Find the deltaG product, add it into your prescription, into your diet where you can. Again, Professor Clarke, it's been an honor to have you on the show, and it was very, very much worth the wait.
Oh, lovely talking to you finally.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits